From Khabib making Conor McGregor choke on his words, to Ronda Rousey getting humbled by Holly Holm in the octagon, these are MMA fighters that got what was coming to them. Let's start with the biggest match in UFC history. I'm talking about Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Leading up to the fight, the Irishman pulled no stops. He insulted the Dagestani every chance he got. Conor told Khabib that he was gonna break his glass chin when they met inside the cage. In response, the lightweight GOAT didn't say much. Things got really heated when Conor attacked Khabib in New York. He even threw a metal dolly at the bus Nurmagomedov was in, causing injury to some on board.
What the f***?
You alright, Mike?
When they finally came face to face at UFC 229, the Dagestani was all worked up and had a chance to uncork all of his bottled up frustration. He dominated the fight, outstriking and outgrappling the Notorious. In the fourth round, he forced Conor to tap, but he wasn't happy that the Irishman took the easy way out after acting all tough. I guess everyone's a gangster until the real gangster shows up, which reminds me of the OG American gangster. Before Conor broke into the scene, there was Chael Sonnen, the man who took trash talking in MMA to another level, using it to sell his fights. He made his rivalry with Anderson Silva the biggest back in the day, just by talking smack at him. Chael called the Spider fake and a fraud, claiming that he had no right to hold the title. The best part is that he backed up all that talk too. In UFC 117, the bad guy showed the world that even a fighter as dominant as Silva was fallible. Sonnen kept the Brazilian on the ground and out-wrestled him for 4 rounds straight. That was something no one had ever seen before. He was dominating the final round and pretty much had the win in the bag. But out of nowhere, Silva snuck in a triangle choke to submit Chael. The middleweight division had tons of superstars back in those days. And once Anderson Silva left, another champ took his place a few years later.
This is my air. This is I do for my entire life and do it with my heart.
Luke Rockhold defeated the unbeatable Chris Weidman to secure the title, which he then defended against Michael Bisping. Rockhold had previously beaten the Count a few years back and was convinced Bisping had no chance in the title fight. He couldn't have been any more wrong.
And you, being the you are, came up to me and was a bitch
I shook
about
your
it.
hand, and you said, I already shook your hand and told me to basically.
As soon as the bell rang, Bisping took the fight to Luke. Within a few minutes of the first round, Bisping knocked the living daylights out of Rockhold. Revenge was sweet, and he had no problem rubbing it in Rockhold's face. The Count managed to silence his doubters as well as his rival, just like Nate Diaz silenced McGregor. Back in the day, Conor wasn't only good on the mic, he was a phenomenal fighter as well. That combination is what made him as successful as he was. No one thought he was beatable back then, but knowing that, Nate decided to step up on very short notice.
I don't know him.
Anything over 40 grand he owes me because that was his last paycheck.
You guys know how crazy Conor can get. He talked down at Diaz at every press conference, every interview, and every media interaction. The Stockton slapper responded in kind to that war of words, but ultimately the Irishman was louder. Heading into the fight, Conor was certain he was going to put Nate to sleep, as he had done to his opponents in the past. Things didn't play out so well for him though. What did he expect? It's Nate Diaz we're talking about. The guy never goes down.
He goes high with the knee. He tags him again.
And can get his face battered for days without even flinching. Instead, the Notorious gassed himself out, and Nate had to sink his hooks in and make Conor tap.
I've been on the end of many defeats in my life, and I've rose back, so I will not shy away from it.
All this talk of Conor reminds me of a wannabe female version of him, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She was one of the most outspoken champs in women's category and knew how to back up her talk. To this day, JJ remains the greatest strawweight title holder in history. She trash-talked the likes of Carla Esparza and Claudia Gadelha and dominated them inside the octagon as well. Joanna loved playing her mind games, and it worked most of the time, until Rose Namajunas came onto the scene.
You keep talking to her. What are you saying to her?
I'm just saying the Lord's Prayer.
The young strawweight wasn't exactly a consistent fighter, and the champ made sure to remind her of that. JJ called Rose mentally weak and said that she was going to have a field day with her. Thug Rose kept her calm though, choosing not to respond to the strawweight queen with words. Instead, she let her fists do the talking when they both clashed. Barely 3 minutes into the fight, Namajunas pounded down on Joanna and earned a TKO win, along with the belt. Speaking of fast knockouts, let's talk about the quickest of them all. Of course, I'm talking about Jorge Masvidal, setting a record record in the UFC against Ben Askren. The Funky came into MMA's premier promotion with a lot of hype around him. Before that, he used to compete in one championship and was rocking an unbeaten record. His performance against UFC legend Robbie Lawler only added to his numbers. He was matched up against Gamebred next, and was the betting favorite heading into the fight. Askren couldn't stop talking about how much better he was than the Florida native. When you talk trash to a guy like Jorge, you better be ready to back it up. Sadly, that wasn't the case here, because Jorge ran at Ben as soon as the match started and landed a flying knee right at the former one welterweight champ, right to his chin. Just 5 seconds into the very first round, Askren was out cold, and Masvidal cemented himself as one of the most dangerous fighters out there.
I really wanted to beat his ass for 14 minutes and 30 seconds, but it didn't get to happen.
I just wish Gamebred could have done something similar against his former teammate, Colby Covington. But as you know, that wasn't the case. That reminds me of another rivalry between former teammates, Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw. Much like Colby and Jorge, these two were once very close and used to train together. However, Cody felt betrayed when Dillashaw decided to leave their gym and pursue his career elsewhere. Years later, the two got together again, this time as coaches in The Ultimate Fighter. The two often got into physical fights on the show, and verbal battles were non-stop. There was even a point where Garbrandt grabbed his former partner by the neck, resulting in an all-out brawl. Usually the smack talk is about selling fights, but this was just too personal. Cody even posted an old video where he could be seen knocking TJ out in one of their sparring matches.
Just like I don't have a knock, I meant like I knocked him out and don't have a video of it.
It's already been, yeah.
I do
Release that
have
shit
it, but I'm
then,
not,
yeah.
you know that.
Bring
TJ,
it.
how many times did I practice?
Things looked like they were going to go the same way when they met in the cage. No Love scored a knockdown on his former friend, but couldn't do enough to secure the win. TJ bounced back in the second round and was able to finish Cody off, and went to secure the title for himself. They met once again a year later, but Dillashaw made sure Garbrandt would never be able to compete on the same level again. Which brings me to another fighter who lost her marbles after a defeat, Ronda Rousey. The Rowdy was never the same after her first ever loss. She was the most dominant fighter back in her glory days and was infamous for finishing off her opponents. She loved trashing her opponent more than trash talking them, and she took down and dominated some of the OG female fighters in the UFC. I'm talking about the likes of Liz Carmouche, Kat Zingano, and of course Miesha Tate. Heading into her 7th title defense against Holly Holm, she probably felt that she was untouchable. Rousey hurled all sorts of insults at the hottie and tried to push her off the stage after their weigh-ins. Holly kept her calm though, choosing to let her aggression loose when they were in the octagon. As could be expected of Ronda, she came out swinging, but she hadn't ever faced a striker with the prowess of Holm. Holly kept ducking and dodging Ronda's wild swings, making sure to hit back at every chance she saw. Finally, at the start of the second round, the hottie connected with a beautiful head kick, the sting of which Rowdy can probably still feel to this day. The result of this loss caused Rousey to retire from the UFC altogether. So from Ronda Rousey getting humbled inside the octagon, to Conor McGregor choking on his words, these were the MMA fighters that got what was coming to them.